Welcome back to Not So Grand Garage. Tonight, I'm out in the driveway working on a 2009 Mercury Mariner. Now the problem is that the ignition switch for this does nothing. Now, if you push in on this key, sometimes it'll hit and crank over just fine. Other times it will not. So this is a super common problem on these as they get up there in mileage. This one's got a little over 150 on the clock now. And I ordered the wrong part to properly fix this. So I'm going to attempt to just replace the electrical side of the switch. But 9 times out of 10, both the mechanical portion of the switch in the column is worn too. So we'll get it apart, take a look at it. It's not too hard to find out, not too hard to take it apart. So we'll get in there, take a look, and see what we can find. First up, to get this apart, we've got 3 bolts to pull out. They've got 5.5 millimeter heads on them. And that'll get this shroud out of the way, as the electrical side of the ignition switch is on the left side of the column. With the shrouds removed, this is the electrical side of the ignition switch. As you can see under here, it comes over, comes up to the ignition cylinder. Now, the other part that you can replace is this whole assembly, and you can get this out of here without pulling the steering wheel, but it's a little bit of a, there's some tricks to it. But we're going to try to replace just the electrical side because that's what showed up today, and we need it fixed. So we're going to pop this electrical connector out right here, get it out of the way, and pull the bolts off of the switch and work it out. Here is the new Motorcraft switch. As you can see, there's a tab right here and a tab right here. That is how the switch is held into place. So to get this out, you need to push in on this tab here. On the top side, the tab is hidden back in here. You'll probably need a flat tip screwdriver or something like that to push on that one. And then the switch should just rock out of position and be able to come off. Once you have the tabs released, the switch will roll forward towards the steering wheel and pop out of place. And then you can work it down past this little harness, and there we are. And as you can see, there's a little bit of wear going on inside that switch. And the other part that moves that switch is right there, which sometimes they get a little bit of wear on them. So we'll see if we get lucky with just replacing the switch, since that's what I've got. But if not, we'll send this back and tear the whole column apart. To put the new switch in, you slide it up into position just like it came out. Like so, and then roll it down into place until it snaps. And that is it. So plug the harness back in, and we'll see if the key starts this thing up now. It's not quite right. It's better. Okay, so I don't think I'm going to be able to get this to work, because the problem is this here. If you pay attention to it, it's got a good bit of play in it between this here and the cylinder itself. So this part here is too worn, so I'm going to put the old switch back in place, send back the new one, and order the right part. Hopefully it'll be here in a couple days. Well, we're back out in the Mariner. It's been a few days and the correct part has shown up. So we're gonna go on and tear into this real quick and get this this entire lock mechanism changed out. Shouldn't be too bad. We're gonna do it without pulling the steering wheel off, which to technically do it the right way, you're supposed to pull the steering wheel off. It allows access to some of the hardware to make it easier. But I don't have a steering wheel puller handy, so I'm gonna skip that step altogether and change it out without doing that. So let's get right into it. I'm not sure if you can see this or not, but we've got our 5.5 millimeter, just the same size that holds the shroud on, but we got one bolt right here, which needs to come out right there. We've got, as you can see, I've got all the wiring disconnected and kind of just pulled up to the top here. We've got one hiding up here in this little pocket. Based on the looks of this, we should have one directly below the breakaway bolt right here. So let's take a look. And it is hidden down here in this little pocket, which looks like it's going to be a little snug getting into, but we'll see how that works. Not too bad. 1/4 inch ratchet with just the 5.5 socket fits right on it. And there's just enough room to turn the ratchet to back that out. Took just a couple minutes and a little bit of patience, because as you can see, that screw is now loose. So all that's left is to get the breakaway bolt out, which I'm gonna have a little trick for that. Then I need to pull the ignition cylinder itself out of the lock assembly, and I need to remove the little sensor for the key, which I believe it's just clipped on, but I'll have to take a look and see how that's gonna work. On this little sensor ring here, there's a little clip right here. There's one on the bottom as well. So pop these loose, careful not to break them, and then slide this off of the ignition cylinder, and then we can get it out of the way. Let's set that ring up out of the way. And the last little bit is the shear bolt. Now a lot of people will bring a Dremel tool in here, cut a groove, and use a flat tip screwdriver or something to back this out. But I'm going to do it a different method because I don't feel like messing with the Dremel tool right now. So, sharp chisel right along the side. Barely catch the head of the bolt. And it doesn't take much. Break it loose. And as you can see, it comes right out. So we can reuse this bolt using the same method. Just put a little dab of Loctite on it when it goes back in, and thread it back down by hand. I'm going to work this bolt out and then see what's left as far as getting this out of the way. So with the electrical side of the switch unhooked, turn the key to the run position. That's going to release the steering wheel lock. And then we need to work this whole assembly back away from the multifunction switch housing. So let's see if I can do that. Out. And there we go, without removing the steering wheel or the airbag module or any of that nonsense. So we can let all this sit. The next step is to get this lock cylinder out of this housing and put it in our new one. So with the key in the off position, rotate it one click forward, and then you can push the release tab down with a pick, and the ignition cylinder will come out. And here's our old one, worn out junk. Go on and insert this in. Make sure everything lines up. It can only go one way. This is D-shaped. It's got a slot in there that's also D-shaped. So line them up. There we go. So in order for this to go back in place, it will need to be in the run position, which locks the steering wheel lock down. So it will be able to easily work back up into place. So it goes back in the same way it come out, which will take a little bit of patience. Come down. Be sure to slide everything in and underneath all the bolts that it's supposed to be under. With a little bit of wiggling and manipulation, it will slide back into place. All the bolt holes have lined back up. The switch is somewhat tight to the ignition housing, so I'm going to go on and put the security bolt back in with a little bit of blue Loctite and tighten it up the same way I took it out. Then I'll put those 3 screws back in and we should be good to go. Got the break off bolt put back in place, a little blue Loctite on it. Use the same method to tighten it up as I used to take it off. So chisel, catch it on the back side. You can spin it down by hand first to get it snug. But yeah, now the key can come out and the little sensor here can snap back into place. And the wiring there. Now we just need to go through and put our screws back in that we took out, which will tighten up this housing or the multifunction switch. Hook all our wiring up and test it. Well, we've got our 3 bolts in. And all of our wiring put back in place and plugged in. So we'll give it a shot and see if it works. No more problems. So that looks to have been the problem. So I'm going to finish up putting these shrouds back on and get cleaned up. I'll be back in a minute. So here's the old ignition cylinder housing, or the lock housing, whatever you want to call it. The issue in these is between that little point in there over to what rotates the ignition switch itself. And what happens is they'll get a little slop in them over time. I mean, this thing's an 09 and it's got 150, 160,000 miles on it now. So these parts wear out. And your symptoms will be when you turn the key to the start position, it won't do anything. The lights on the dash and everything will light up just like normal, but it will not crank, it will not start. You might think the battery might be weak or the starter might be dead. But if you push inward on the key, push the key inward towards the steering column firmly, and then turn the key to the start position, and it starts, you know this is your problem right off the bat. Like I showed earlier at the beginning of this video, I ordered the wrong part. This thing's been acting up for a while, and I've been using the firmly push the key method to get the thing started for, I don't know, 6 months to a year. Typical mechanic's car, right? So I put things off. It is what it is. So when I went to order the part again, because I looked the part up before, it was about $100 when I looked it up the first time. When I went to look it up the second time, I couldn't find the entire assembly. All I found was a switch. And I noticed it was cheaper. I was like, well, hey, I'll just replace the switch. And I knew better. I knew I needed the entire assembly, but couldn't find it, couldn't remember what it was called. And anyways, ended up getting this. Like I said, you've got the part number. I'll put the part number to this in the video description. I'll put a link to it as well. And yeah. So if I wouldn't have been fiddling around with this camera, I would say probably a 20-minute job without pulling the steering wheel and pulling the airbag and all that nonsense that you don't need to do. As you saw, nothing broke. Everything came apart real easy. It can be a little tedious, takes a little patience, but that's okay. This can save you a lot of time and a lot of labor at a shop. You can do this with a couple hand tools in a matter of 20 minutes, 30 minutes tops, and be back on the road. So yeah. Anyways, I'm going to wrap this up here. If you want to support the channel, I've got the PayPal account set up. Link to that is in the description of every video. We've got SuperThanks enabled as well, so you can go that route if you'd like. Feel free to do so. If you've got any comments, questions, complaints, drop them in the comment section below. I try to stay on top of that, but yeah, try to answer all your guys' questions and comments as best I can. But yeah, if you haven't already, please subscribe, and we appreciate you watching.